Few thank yous before we get started. Thank you to the boosters. If your parent or family member, somebody at home, neighbor is a booster, please tell them thank you and that you're having a good time at Writers Week. We wouldn't be able to put this on without the boosters. Thank you to the tech crew up in the booth who was working their tails off all week to make everything up here look and sound the way that it is supposed to sound. Thank you. You're going to turn and say thank you to your English teacher or your teacher who brought you to this period down the row. Among many reasons, they are one of the reasons why Fremd High School is one of the best places to work, in all of places to work. And thank you to you for being a mindful, thoughtful, creative, inquisitive, respectful audience. We would not have 32 years of Writers Week if it wasn't for the amazing students that you are. So thank you to everybody here. All right, now to the guests behind me. Sudanese by way of Washington, D.C., Safia El-Hilo is the author of the books The January Children, Girls That Never Die, Home Is Not a Country, which was longlisted for the National Book Award, and Bright Red Fruit, which was a finalist for the Kirkus Prize. We have several of those books for sale over here. So at the end of the presentation, if you want to purchase one, I'm sure she would be happy to sign, personalize, take a selfie. That can be done at the end of the period. Safia's work appears in Poetry Magazine, Callaloo, in the Academy of American Poets Poem-A-Day series, among others, and in anthologies including The Breakbeat Poets, New American Poetry in the Age of Hip Hop, and the Penguin Book of Migration Literature. With Fatima Asghar, she is the co-editor of the anthology Halal If You Hear Me, which was a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award. Her fellowships include a Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Fellowship from the Poetry Foundation, Cave Canem, and a Wallace Stenger Fellowship from Stanford University. She was listed in Forbes Africa's 2018 30 Under 30. Please put your hands together and help me in welcoming to the Writers' Week stage, Safia El-Hilo.
Good morning. Thank you. I love it when people say back. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Safia El-Hilo. Hours before, the night outside is black as my grandmother's hair. It's newborn moon in Sagittarius. And in the Maryland house, my mother is 23 behind a winning hand of cards as the water darkens the length of her skirt. December now, and friends still call her El-Arus, the bride. 11 months married and the shock of it not yet settled behind her eyes. Morning and the baby has not come. Milky winter sun in Sagittarius. I should mention there was a husband, 27. I can hardly imagine it, a boy that age, my father. I cannot picture him in the room, though his work for years to come will absorb him into countries that smell of blood. Maybe he is in the room now, not yet a specter. I sketch him in, but do not know where to put him. Maybe in the corner, back rigid against the white wall. I cannot imagine them ever touching. I smudge him out, correct the still wet scene. He is outside, long-limbed in a hard plastic chair. My mother called him Jack, and this is my only proof they were in love. My mother is almost my mother now, darker color of the noontime sun. In the waiting room, I should also place my grandparents, elegant in that old over-formal way of immigrants. My grandfather's shirt never without a collar, lush neatness of the afro against his head. My grandmother could pass for a film star, hair black and feathered down her back. Any suggestion of curl or coil since burnt away and set every morning in hot rollers. Her eyebrows tattooed as they have been all my life, blue-black parentheses. Both of them older than the independent state of the Sudan. My grandmother 13 years its senior. My grandfather a January child of unknown birthday, though the colonial offices recorded as 26 years before his country is born. They are placid companions. Their courtship cooled amicably into a sort of siblinghood, and I have never seen them touch, so I cannot imagine it now. He paces the cool length of the hallway. 1 hour and 39 minutes past noon, that final diluvian push, and I am outside, full head of wet hair. pomegranate creature cawing that little animal sound, pronounced a girl and named for a dead great aunt, the birth certificate dated and signed in ink. Back home, I would have been known by my first two names, mine and my father's, Safia Yaqub, the surname rarely used, but in the new country, the paper demands a patronym. Anglicized, the L becomes a looser L. Hello, meaning sweet, strange, unserious allonym of that first great-grandfather, and crowded together on a single line, marked first name, our names, mine and his, Safia Yaqub, little echo of that forgotten epithet, that once loved man, of Jack. And though I am not named from my mother, we match, Safa, noun form of my adjective, our shared first syllable, closest I have ever seen them, him and her, almost touching. I was born in Rockville, Maryland, to Sudanese parents, which I guess would make me a first-generation Sudanese American, a child of immigrants. But then we kept going. Over the 10 years that followed, we lived in Kenya, Tanzania, Egypt, England, and Switzerland before finally settling in Washington, D.C. in the summer of 2000. 8 years later, my mother and brother moved back to Egypt, and I moved to New York. We continue to add cities to our list. I lived in Los Angeles for almost 5 years now, and I am one of only a handful of my family members still living in this country. Almost 3 years ago, war broke out in Sudan, scattering my family around the globe, separated by war and travel bans. Their different combinations of passports, meaning there's no longer any one place where we can all be together. And with every new line added to that list of places, I get further away from any answer to that question of where I'm from, of where it is that I can claim. The lyrics do not translate. Arabic is all verbs for what stays still in other languages. Tasbah, to morning, what the translation to awake cannot honor, cannot contain its rhyme with tasbah, to swim, to make the night a body of water. I am here now, and I am not buoyant. I am far away and always sick, small for my age and always translating. I cannot sleep through the night. No language has given me the rhyme between ocean and wound that I know to be true. Sometimes, when the doctors draw my blood, I feel the word at the edge of my tongue. Halim sings, aghraq, aghraq. I am drowning, I am drowning. The single word for all the water in his throat does not translate. Halim sings, teach me to kill the tear in its duct. Halim sings, I have no experience in love, nor have I a boat, and I know he cannot rest, cannot swim through the night. I am looking for a voice with a wound in it, a man who could only have died by a form of drowning. Let the song take its time. Let the ocean close back up. As a result, I've harbored a near lifelong obsession with what to call myself, reaching for the existing terms and finding in them only loose approximations. I hear children of immigrants talk about being children of immigrants, and I think, me too, almost, sort of. My parents never completely immigrated here, and instead have spent the years of my life in and out of this country. I hear immigrants talk about being immigrants, and I also think, me too, almost, sort of. I did not immigrate here because I was born here, but we left after I was born. So then I myself had the experience years later of coming to America, the shock of it. And not that I ever considered myself able to speak for whole demographics, but on the occasions that I'm asked to speak to the immigrant experience or about being a child of immigrants, I want to tell the person doing the asking that they might be asking the wrong person. What title can I claim? Almost immigrant, child of almost immigrants, almost Sudanese, and almost American. I felt myself adrift for years in languagelessness, devouring books and hoarding words in an attempt to collage myself a reflection somewhere. Here, in one book, was a character who had curly hair, like I do, but she was white. Here in another was a character who spoke Arabic at home, like I do, but she wasn't black. Here was a character who had an accent, like I sometimes do, but it was because she was fluent in a different language. I felt like I was made of all these discarded details, the ones I couldn't find written down anywhere. So in the world outside, I was always an other, always newly arrived to some country that wasn't my own. And then in the books I would turn to for shelter, for comfort, I was an other. As a young reader, I read everything I could get my hands on, read hungrily, waiting for that hot spark of recognition, and was met with hundreds of almosts, of not quites, which I'm sure is a familiar feeling for many young readers, particularly those of color, because it's not that everyone else is so well represented and I'm just so different. I couldn't find myself in books because there were not enough books. It's not that I didn't exist, it's that the book I needed to read to see myself, to see my life and my experiences and my intersections as deserving of literature, did not yet exist. Enter the famous Toni Morrison quote, which I love as does everyone else. If there's a book that you want to read, but it hasn't been written, then you must write it. So I did. I wrote hundreds of poems, then a book of poems called The January Children, then another called Girls That Never Die, and then a novel in verse called Home Is Not a Country, and then another called Bright Red Fruit. The novel in verse is a hybrid form, a genre in the hyphen between genres, and I think it really lends itself to expressing the feeling of being in between worlds. I'd like to say that that's why I chose to write those novels as a series of poems, but really, the choice to write in verse ultimately comes down to the freedom that verse affords me. I feel like I am never going to be fully fluent in English, or in any language, really. And verse has always been a space for me where I feel like the rules of language are mine to set, mine to play with and experiment with and stretch. I feel less at the mercy of external measures of fluency, and instead I feel the language soften and grow more malleable, able to mutate in order to accommodate the things that I need to say. I don't feel bound by the rules of proper English or correct grammar, because in a poem, I get to invent my English as one of infinite Englishes and set my own grammar. And I wanted to be able to tell these stories with that set of tools available to me, especially since the medium was new to me, writing fiction. I wanted to at least still have the form where I feel most at home. My grandparents and occasionally my mother speak what an old Arabic teacher of mine used to call translationese, a beautiful crooked syntax where they would first conceive of a thought in Arabic before speaking it in English. Turn on the light and turn off the light becomes open the light and close the light. I would like some tomato soup becomes I love tomato soup. These moments of misspeaking are my favorite language, are my language. This is the only language I want to write in. Fact, the Arabic word hawa means wind. The Arabic word hawa means love. Test, multiple choice. Abd al-Halim said, "You left me holding wind in my hands." Or Abd al-Halim said, "You left me holding love in my hands." Abd al-Halim was left empty, or Abd al-Halim was left full. Feyruz said, "Oh wind, take me to my country." Or Feyruz said, "Oh love, take me to my country." Feyruz is looking for vehicle, or Feyruz is looking for fuel. Kulthum said, "Where the wind stops her ships, we stop ours." Or Kulthum said, "Where love stops her ships, we stop ours." Kulthum is stuck, or Kulthum is home. One of the conditions of my in-betweenness, of my almostness, is feeling constantly in between language, never fully belonging to one or the other. The guilt of feeling like I traded in one for the other and ended up with an incomplete version of each. I have access to the two worlds that the two different languages contain, but I'm also never going to be entirely at home in either, because part of me will always belong to the other. I feel most comfortable speaking in a sort of hybrid language, where the words can be in Arabic or in English, and I don't have to make sure that what comes out of my mouth is entirely in a single language. I'm trying to exercise some of the shame that comes from this lack of fluency by accepting that there's a third language that forms in the hybrid space between the two, between Arabic and English, and that language is my language, the language I am fluent in. In situations where I'm most comfortable, that's the language I speak. My mother and I, my brother and I, my cousins and childhood best friends, we speak in this combination of Arabic and English. The word comes out in whatever language it was thought in, and I'm trying to write poems that reflect what language sounds like in my head. Growing up bilingual made language my great obsession, my great wound, and my great love. It's basically all I ever want to write about. In the divorce, I separate to two piles. books, English, love songs, Arabic. My angers, my schooling, my long repeating name, English, English, Arabic. I am someone's daughter, but I am American born. It shows in my short memory, my ahistoric glamour, my clumsy tongue when I forget the word for in Arabic. I sleep, unbroken dark hours on airplanes home, and dream I've missed my connecting flight. I dream a new and fluent mouth full of gauzy swaths of Arabic. I dream my alternate selves, each with a face borrowed from photographs of the girl who became my grandmother, brows and body rounded and cursive like Arabic, but awake to the usual borderlands. I crowd shining slivers of English to my mouth. Iris, crocus, inlet, heron. How dare I love a word without knowing it in Arabic? And what even is translation, is immigration without irony. Safia means pure. All my life it's been true, even in my clouded Arabic. Before Home is Not a Country was a novel, it was a symptom of my obsession with the life I could have led, the person I could have been if I'd been born and raised in the country of my origins. I think often about something the poet Ladan Osman said in an interview. The most difficult part of negotiating both identities was not knowing if I was my authentic self, whether I'd be a different person had I grown up back home. I've also been obsessed for a long time with Mahmoud Darwish's In the Presence of Absence, where he writes, "Longing is a misunderstanding between existence and borders. If I were there, you say, if I were there, my laugh would be louder and my speech clearer." I spend a lot of time thinking about the idea of alternate or parallel selves in the context of the diasporic experience. Who would I be if I had only grown up back home? How would I be different? That sort of thing. I wrote a poem called Yasmin about my obsession with the name I was almost given and the parallel life that might have come with that alternate name. I don't know if you can see it. It looks like this. It is a contrapuntal for those of you that read Olio. So I'm going to read it down each column and then across. Yasmin. I was born at the rupture, the root where I split from my parallel self. I split from the girl I also could have been, and her name, Easy. I know the story. All my life, my mother wanted a girl named for a flower, whose oil scents all our mothers, petals wrung for their perfume. I was planted. Land became ocean, became land anew, its shape refusing root in my fallow mouth, cleaving my life neatly, and my name, taken from a dead woman, to remember, to fill an aperture with cut jasmine in a bowl, our longing, our mother's wilting garlands hanging from our necks. And now across. I was born, I was planted, at the rupture, the root, where land became ocean, became land anew. I split from my parallel self. I split from its shape, refusing root in my fallow mouth, the girl I also could have been, cleaving my life neatly. And her name, Easy, I know the story. And my name, taken from a dead woman. All her life, my mother wanted to remember, to fill an aperture with a girl named for a flower, cut jasmine in a bowl, whose oil scents all our longing, our mother's petals wrung, wilting for their perfume, garlands hanging from our necks. For so long, I think I functioned from the idea, lived from the idea, wrote from the idea, that where I am from and where I exist were drastically different places, irreconcilably different even. But to think that way is to first and foremost reinforce one of the central ideas of Orientalist thinking, this binary between here and over there, east and west. And I find myself these days growing increasingly disillusioned by the governance of the border as a marker of anything, the governance of geography as a measure of figurative distance. For so long, I thought of myself as gone, as far away, aching to go back. But gone from where? To where? Gone from what? Back to what? In a way, I think maybe what I'm circling so much in my thinking these days is that I don't really know what a country is anymore, and what it is anymore to be from a country. A country is so fallible, so temporary even. Borders move and mutate and sprout and grow like vines. So maybe what I'm trying to say is that the landscape itself is begging me to find new language for it. after I've tried and failed over and over to articulate it in these terms of fromness and goneness and distance and absence, I mourn some invented golden age of Sudan that probably wasn't as neat and tidy and narrativized as it gets to be in retrospect, in nostalgia, in its absence and its haunting. Some golden age of Sudan that was deeply classed, deeply grayscale, deeply with its own set of costs and complications. And still, I decided I was from there, and that it was lost to me in being gone. And that because the place, or a place in time really, that I felt such attachment to, because that place was gone, I couldn't have any identity in terms of lack or absence or loss. And in doing so, I developed the bad habit of only talking and writing about Sudan in past tense, as if it were gone or lost, as if I didn't actually have a life there, one I am mourning now that the war has taken it from me. Because of the war, I am mourning all the time I spent looking backward at a time before mine, instead of relishing the present tense, the actual Sudan I did have, the book I left tented on a nightstand in February of 2023, with plans to pick it up the next time, the casual way I used to be able to say that, next time. But what is it to identify oneself using one's nationality? A nation is such a strange fiction, so arbitrary, because on the one hand, I am Sudanese, I feel incredibly Sudanese, but on the other hand, what is Sudan? Which Sudan? There are now formally two Sudans, and so many Sudans within those Sudans, so what is it exactly that I am gone from, that I ache to return to? My longing for a place, if pressed too hard, falls apart because I don't know that I necessarily even have a concept of place. It all turns into place and time for me. So of course I had to write a novel about time travel because my diasporic experience has primarily been an experience of time travel, of that slipperiness between place and time. So much about immigration has felt like time travel to me, the homeland forever preserved as the version of itself we left. So to claim that place, to be from that place, requires traveling backwards through time. This eternal limbo of being caught between past and future tense, the past tense of the idealized homeland, the imagined future of someday finally feeling at home in the host land, all while forgetting about the present. The present tense is my third space, that familiar in between, is the only tense I can live in. Warsan Shire writes, "We took such care of tomorrow, but died on the way there." I want to take care of where I already am. Right now, I am here, and I want to take care of that, to really be here. Tomorrow, I'll be in New York, and I want to take care of that, to really be there. Next week, I'll be back home in Los Angeles, and I want to take care of that, to really be there, and so on. I've always wanted to belong to a city, to a place, but never have. But I've always belonged to diasporic communities everywhere I've gone. Those are my people, rebuilding a life in the aftermath of great rupture. Those are the communities that taught me that there are many Englishes, many Arabics, and that my language was my own to make, that my home was my own to make. I make poems for my communities, for the aunties and uncles that taught me Arabic on Sundays in a rented classroom at a middle school. I make poems for their children, my friend cousins, my infinite siblings, and the languages we invented together. I grew up in an invented world, among the people who built it with their own hands. So I grew up believing anything could be made and could be made real. Those handmade spaces, those hybrid approximations of one country inside another, those spaces are the closest I've come to feeling from anywhere. My mother says a lot, "I made home." And I think that really helps me combat this notion of home as a fixed, static location that I can only hope to find if I were to just learn the right vocabulary word or tradition or recipe. Instead, it presents the option of home as a portable environment, home as a decision, a project, people, a community, rather than a country. A country is fallible, is at the mercy of its governments and their wars. A country, ultimately, was once itself created by the drawing of a man-made border. So what is a country but the drawing of a line? Today I draw thick black lines around my eyes, and they are a country, and thick red lines around my lips, and they are a country. And the knife that chops the onions draws a smooth line through my finger, and that is a country. And the tightening denim presses a soft purple line into my belly, and when I smile like my mother, a line flashes between my two front teeth. And for every country I lose, I make another, and I make another. My friendships have been the space where I've healed a lot of my relationships to identity, to belonging. So many of my questions and crises around identity were wrapped up in this idea of a country, needing one to claim. I was basing my whole sense of who I was around this intangible thing. Meanwhile, the nation state doesn't care about me. So I'm trying to find out other ways to identify myself that are not so dependent on something man-made, not so dependent on someone having drawn an often violent, often bloody line on a map and deciding that that says something about me, deciding that's what I have to call myself. I'm interested now in trying to find other things to pledge allegiance to call home. My home is not a country. A country is not the only way to belong, to identify oneself. It is maybe the least interesting way to do those things. Home is about love and community and care, not about borders, which are made up, or about countries, which are also made up. My communities and my friendships are the spaces where I can heal from the failures of larger constructs of nation and citizenship and allegiance. I think I don't actually care anymore where I belong, because I know who I belong to, who I am accountable to. And I want to honor that in my work, those little interpersonal spaces that feel like home, when the larger questions about home feel so unanswerable. So I pledge allegiance to my homies, to my mother's small and cool palms, to the gap between my brother's two front teeth, and to my grandmother's good brown hands, good strong brown hands gathering my bare feet in her lap. I pledge allegiance to the group text. I pledge allegiance to laughter and to everyone I have a crush on. I pledge allegiance to my spearmint plant, to my split ends, to my grandfather's brain and gray left eye. I come from two failed countries, and I give them back. I pledge allegiance to no land, no border cut by force to draw blood. I pledge allegiance to no government, no collection of men carving up the map with their pens. I choose the table at the Waffle House with all my loved ones crowded into the booth. I choose the shining dark of our faces through a thin sheet of smoke, glowing dark of our faces slick under layers of sweat. I choose the world we make with our living, refusing to be unmade by what surrounds us. I choose us gathered at the lakeside, the light glinting off the water in our laughing teeth and along the living dark of our hair. And this is my only country. Theodore Adorno says, for a man who no longer has a homeland, writing becomes a place to live. I love poems because I love my community. Everything I have ever written has been an offering to someone I love. Sitting in a circle and reading poems aloud to each other was such a big part of my adolescence and young adulthood. Wherever we were, even once at the club, by the end of the night, we'd be in that circle, somebody reading out poems. I might be more jaded now, but I need to spend more time remembering that feeling, because that's the engine. It's not to prove how smart I am or to prove that I can write a metaphor, because honestly, who cares? I just want to make my friends laugh or shed a tear or snap their fingers and give me edits. I want the kids I went to Sudanese school with on Sundays to be like, I remember that. I want my grandfather to smile and nod and ask me to read it again. So I do have a home in my communities, in my groups of friends, in my family, and this is what I pledge allegiance to when flags continue to fail me. This is what I call home. I have always been at home in books too, even as a young reader. It just maybe felt for a long time like a home where I didn't have my own room. So now I am trying to build that room, one poem at a time, one book at a time. I'm a person who feels so deeply of the third spaces that form in between worlds, cultures, languages, and now in between genres. What is a novel in verse, if not that kind of hybrid third space, much like being a hyphenated American or a diasporic being or a teenager, which is this third space between childhood and adulthood. It felt like all these things were versions of each other. The novel in verse is a hybrid form. The diasporic experience is a hybrid form. Adolescence is a hybrid form, which is why I wanted my first novel to be a novel for young people. It started out as an offering to my younger self, the young reader I was who is the reason I am a writer today. I wanted to make a book that would have made it all feel possible for me sooner. It took me a while to really believe that the world I came from was deserving of poetry, of literature, because I wasn't seeing my particular intersections in any book. So I wanted to tell a story about a young person who contains my intersections. And I wanted to offer this story to someone who is the age now that I was then, to hopefully add a little bit to the conversation they might be having with themselves about what is possible in a book, and maybe make a home for them in that possibility, and maybe make a home for them in that book. that's enough to keep me writing. Little homes for all my loved ones, for all my people. That's my hope. I surprise myself with how hopeful I am. Thank you. Okay, as instructed, I have been keeping my eye on the clock, and we have about 10 minutes for questions, if anyone has a question. You also might need to help me out because I'm not wearing my glasses, so. Yes, hi. Yeah, thank you. The question was when I moved to New York and to Los Angeles, was it in hopes of trying to find myself? New York, definitely. I moved to New York when I was 18 years old. And, you know, the official story is that I moved there to go to college. But in reality, I moved to New York to be an artist. And I really feel like I came of age as a writer and as a creative person in that space because everyone around me was someone who was making something or who was attempting to make something. And so I was surrounded by all of these teachers as we were all figuring out something together. I have almost the opposite experience of LA, which I love it deeply and I'm very happy to be there. And it's also the first time in my life I've moved somewhere where it wasn't for school or for a job or anything. And so I feel a lot of freedom in my life there because the container isn't dictated by something external like work, like school. And so my life in Los Angeles is mostly just walking around enjoying the sunshine, smelling the flowers, which is good for the poems too, I think. Yeah? Yeah. The question is, what does it mean to me, at least, trying to find yourself? I think for me, because my identity as an artist, as a poet, is so closely bound up in how I conceive of my personhood, finding myself and finding my voice as a writer, my place in the world as a creative person, as a member of a creative community, all felt like different aspects of the same process. And in deciding that I wanted to be a writer, deciding that I wanted to live an unconventional and creative life, you know, saying that your vibe attracts your tribe. It kind of is that we're in learning to say it with my chest. This is what I am. This is what I want to be. It brought me to the people in my life who created the landscape of the life that I had envisioned for myself. So in deciding I want to be an artist, I want to be a writer, it led me to other people who also are on that same kind of hard to define, murky journey. And in building those relationships, in deciding who those people were to me, who I was to them, it helped me just develop a much stronger sense of who I am in the world, what my purpose is, who I'm accountable to, what my responsibility is to those people, if that makes sense. But I do think whenever someone says trying to find yourself, it's a bit of a free-floating signifier. It means a different thing to different people. Yeah, thank you. Yes, hi. How long did it take me to find myself? When did I know who I really am? I think it is a lifelong journey. I think I'm still very much in the thick of it. There are definitely things about myself that I feel a lot more certain about than I did 10, 15 years ago. And also, I think the thing that I have found is more than I want to have any like solid, fixed sense of identity, what is most important to me is that I feel that I have the freedom to change my mind about any of the stuff I've decided about myself at any point. And that feels like the closest I've come to articulating who I am and what I want, where my primary interest is freedom and freedom to choose, freedom to decide, freedom to change my mind, freedom to pick something up because it seems interesting, and then the freedom to put it down when it stops being interesting. But I think that process is ongoing. Yeah, I would argue that that's a sort of finding yourself as well, this kind of commitment to radical presence. I also think I don't necessarily have a sense of myself in a vacuum where if you were to like shoot me out into space and it was just me and the dark, I don't know that I have like a strong sense of I, Safia, am this, because so much of it is situational, is about my relationships, is about my contexts, is about the choices I make, the values I uphold. And I think a lot of the stuff that I think endures is maybe getting to the heart of who I am or what I'm trying to find about myself. But I think how mutable it is, how much it changes, I think is also very much a part of the human condition. And so I'm trying not to be rigid at all in my sense of self and to just give myself the freedom and the flexibility to be whoever the moment calls for as it presents itself. Hi. Yeah, thank you. I think I spent a lot of my younger life thinking that the question of my identity, my belonging existed like somewhere externally and I just had to go out and find it. And once I found it, it would be there all prepared for me. I just had to arrive. But it would be one thing, I think, maybe this romantic notion would have lasted longer if I'd moved to the US and I never went back to Sudan, for example. But before the war, I used to go to Sudan all the time. And what I started to realize, I would be in DC, for example, and every time something was difficult or uncomfortable or painful, immediately I would be like, if only I was back home, nothing would hurt and everything would be perfect. And then I would go back to Sudan, and Sudan is great, but it's just a place like any other place. There's like traffic and errands to run, and people are annoying. And I would arrive, and I would wait for this like big romantic revelation that I'm home and everything is correct, but it would just be the same, different weather, but otherwise the same. And I realized that if I was going to keep thinking that way, I was going to be disappointed for the rest of my life. And in doing that, I really was ignoring a lot of the ways in which I did have a deep sense of belonging, a deep sense of community. So here I was surrounded by all these friends and family, and I just was completely overlooking them and being like, but imagine a country. And I think when I moved away, and I was, away from the people that I'd had around to tell me who I was my entire life, I started to realize that those people were the things that made me feel at home. And so I have since committed myself to paying special attention to the tangible aspects of my life, people, relationships, community, things like that, instead of country, because, I don't know that that word actually calls anything specific to mind when I think of it, except like bad news and difficult history. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. The question is about using different tenses to different effects in my poems. And I would say overwhelmingly most of my writing is in the present tense because especially in poetry, I want this sense of immediacy. I want the reader to feel that they are experiencing these thoughts and emotions with my speaker as they are occurring to my speaker. And so kind of without exception, I primarily write in present tense. Thank you all for your time and for spending your morning with me.